Okay, let's unpack this. We're taking a deep dive into a stack of your sources covering, well, one of the biggest challenges facing global trade today, decarbonizing shipping.
It's huge, isn't it?
Absolutely. Think of this as your shortcut to getting really well informed on something that moves, what, over 80% of everything traded globally.
That's the scale we're talking about. Essential. But there's the flip side.
Right. This massive industry is also responsible for about 3% of worldwide greenhouse gas emissions.
To put that in perspective, if shipping were a country, it'd be like the world's sixth largest emitter.
Exactly. So our mission today, understand the complex forces driving this change and, crucially, what it all means financially for you.
Yeah, from the billions needed for new ships and infrastructure.
Down to the direct costs tied to every single ton of emissions data. It's fascinating because the industry is so vital, but also such a major climate player.
And navigating that means financial strategy isn't just about profit now, it's tangled up with environmental goals, regulation.
And keeping global logistics actually viable, economically speaking.
Precisely.
Okay, so what's driving this? The pressure. It seems to be coming hard and fast from two main places, right?
That's right. You've got the global body, the International Maritime Organization, the IMO.
And then you've got the European Union, the EU, and here's a kicker where they head. Ships might have to deal with both sets of rules if they trade in Europe.
Which many, many do. Let's start with the IMO. They really firmed up their strategy recently, didn't they?
Yeah, at MEPC 83, that big meeting in April 2025, the headline goal is net zero emissions.
By or around 2050, that's the big one. But with critical checkpoints before then.
Like that 40% cut in carbon intensity by 2030 compared to 2008.
Exactly. And they've approved this IMO net zero framework. It has technical bits, but also a really significant economic element, penalties.
And these penalties, they aren't trivial. Your sources mention figures like $100 up to, what, $380 per ton of CO2 equivalent if you don't comply starting 2028.
Which is a serious incentive. And a key detail is how they measure it. Well to wake.
Ah, yes. Explain that. It's not just the ship's funnel.
No, not at all. It means looking at the entire life cycle emissions of the fuel, from its production, transport, all the way to when it's actually burned on the ship.
So that adds a whole other layer of complexity. You have to think about how the fuel is even made.
Absolutely. It changes the calculation entirely. Meanwhile, the EU, well, they're not waiting around.
No, they've already brought shipping into their emissions trading system, the ETS. That started in 2025.
So if your ship calls at an EU port, you're buying carbon allowances for 100% of emissions within the EU and 50% for trips to or from the EU.
And that coverage ramps up fast, hitting 100% for everything by 2028.
And the penalty for not complying with the EU ETS, it's steep. €100 per ton.
Plus, you still owe the allowances. It's a real double hit.
Makes non-compliance incredibly expensive. And if you fail for 2 years running, you could even be banned from EU ports. Ouch!
And then the EU added another layer, FuelEU Maritime, also from 2025.
Right. This one sets targets for reducing the greenhouse gas intensity of the fuels used.
It starts fairly gently, a 2% cut by 2029, but then it accelerates really sharply, 80% reduction by 2050.
And crucially, it also uses that well-to-wake calculation. Consistency there, at least.
What about penalties under FuelEU?
Also significant, around 643 per ton of CO2 equivalent deficit. So as those targets get tougher, the cost missing them just balloons.
Okay, so let's talk money. What does all this pressure mean for your bottom line?
It's huge. The estimates in your sources are, frankly, staggering. $28 billion annually just for fleet changes.
Just for the ships themselves. And then infrastructure.
Another $28 to $90 billion per year. Think new bunkering facilities for these alternative fuels.
Wow. And the knock-on effect. A 10% rise in shipping costs could trim global GDP by maybe $80 billion.
It shows how interconnected this all is. The sources are clear. Just paying the penalties. That's the most expensive option long-term.
So being proactive is key. What's the smart money doing?
Well, first, energy efficiency. That's the low-hanging fruit because it cuts fuel use, costs, and emissions.
Makes sense. And beyond that?
Switching fuels. It's unavoidable for compliance. Right now, your sources suggest pathways like LNG or bio-LNG seem to be the least costly among the current alternatives.
And FuelEU Maritime has some interesting flexibility built in, doesn't it? Banking and pooling.
Yes, very powerful tools. You can bank a surplus if you overcomply 1 year, use it later, and fascinatingly, that surplus stays with the ship.
even if it's sold or the manager changes.
Exactly. And pooling lets you group ships together, maybe across different companies even, to meet targets collectively.
That could really change fleet management strategies, couldn't it? Trading surpluses, new partnerships.
Definitely opens up possibilities. However, it's not easy. These clean fuels have that green premium.
Right, costing way more than traditional fuels. Over 1,000 more per ton, you mentioned.
At least currently, yes. And then there's the price of carbon allowances, like under the EU ETS. Highly volatile.
Around €65 early 2025, but forecasts are all over the place. Adds a lot of risk to planning.
It does. Managing that volatility, that premium, it demands really sharp financial planning. And underpinning all of this, data.
Good verified emissions data.
Absolutely critical, not just for reporting, but for making sure costs are shared fairly. Think contracts between owners, charterers, managers.
They all need updating. It's non-negotiable according to your sources.
It really is.
So this deep dive shows maritime decarbonization isn't just an environmental thing. It's this incredibly complex regulatory and financial puzzle.
Demanding proactive strategy, huge investment, and really meticulous data management.
The cost of doing nothing looks incredibly high. But smart compliance, using tools like banking and pooling, making informed fuel choices based on well-to-wake data.
That could actually create competitive advantages for some players.
Which brings us to a final thought. We see the IMO and the EU pushing hard, but with different systems, different timelines, different penalties.
Yeah, how might these systems eventually align or influence each other? Could we see a truly global price on shipping emissions emerge from this?
Something definitely worth thinking about as this massive transition keeps unfolding.
I hope you enjoyed this AI-generated podcast and found it both interesting and informative. Do press the like button and share this video with your fellow industry professionals.